Religion is at the heart of Sumerian life. The Sumerian pantheon is complex and includes several major gods, each associated with natural forces or spheres of human activity. Enlil, the god of air, considered the king of gods and the guarantor of sovereignty. An, the god of the sky, often presented as the father or ancestor of many other deities. Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom, reputed for his benevolence and ingenuity. Inanna, Ishtar, the goddess of love, sexuality, and war, particularly revered in Uruk. Nanna, the moon god, protector of the city of Ur. Utu, the sun god, regulator of justice and truth. In this religious system, the king serves as an intermediary between the gods and the city. He is entrusted with important rituals, such as ceremonies to obtain favorable flooding or the celebration of seasonal festivals. This religious power complements his political authority, giving the royal function a quasi-sacred dimension. Sovereigns are sometimes depicted on steles and tablets as the protégés of a particular deity, supposed to grant them strength and legitimacy. Sumerian mythology also developed in oral form, later becoming written. One of the most famous stories, whose origins probably date back to this period, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Although the complete version we know comes from later periods, the first fragments of the story seem to have circulated during the Sumerian Golden Age. Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, embarks on a quest for immortality, traveling the world accompanied by his friend Enkidu. This epic reflects the Sumerian view of life, characterized by close relationships with divinity, reflections on death, and heroic quests. Cuneiform texts, archaeological excavations, and artistic representations provide insights into the daily organization of Sumerian society. The family followed a patriarchal system. Inheritance was primarily passed through the male line. However, women were not completely excluded from spheres of power. Influential priestesses existed, especially in the cult of Inanna, where some women held the status of high priestess, conducting rituals and sometimes administering religious domains. Education was of crucial importance for the elites. Small schools, often attached to temples or palaces, trained scribes. These scribes learned cuneiform writing and mathematics in a sexagesimal system, which is based on the number 60, still perceptible in our 60 minutes per hour and 360 degrees in a circle. Mastering accounting was a key asset for stock management, tax collection, and the coordination of major works. Sumerian art is distinguished by its finesse and attention to detail. For example, many gold jewelry pieces inlaid with lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone imported from Afghanistan, can be found. Artisans also created finely engraved cylinder seals, which were rolled onto clay to mark ownership or sign an official document. Temples are filled with prayer statues, small sculptures, often made of stone or limestone, representing worshippers with wide eyes and clasped hands in prayer. These statues were placed before the deity to mark the perpetual devotion of the faithful, even in their absence. Despite this period of relative stability, rivalries between cities were a recurring feature of Sumerian history. Water was indeed the source of many conflicts. A poorly managed canal or diverted dam could ruin the crops of a neighboring city. Thus, the quest for control of fertile lands and irrigation routes triggered periodic clashes. One of the most famous examples is the conflict between Lagash and Umma, two neighboring cities claiming the same border area. Eannatum, the king of Lagash, emerged victorious and had his triumphant stele of the vultures carved, depicting his soldiers confronting the enemy. However, Sumer was not just about internal battles. The cities established intercultural exchanges with Elam, a region located in what is now southwestern Iran. These relations included both the trade of goods, metals, wood, precious stones, and mutual influence on artistic and spiritual levels. Some Sumerian kings even sought to consolidate alliances or achieve peace by hiring foreign mercenaries or even bringing in specialized craftsmen from other regions to boost their production workshops. Despite tensions, Sumer's reputation grew beyond its borders. Caravanners and merchants told stories of grandiose cities, temples with multiple levels, refined goldsmithing, and abundant grain harvests. Nomadic tribes established in the more arid regions to the north or east looked enviously upon these prosperous lands, prompting the Sumerians to frequently fortify their cities and form militias. Between 2500 and 2330 BC, the Sumerian city-states continued their development, but the Golden Age gradually gave way to more intense political rivalries. Each city attempted to impose its hegemony over Lower Mesopotamia, without succeeding in creating a stable and lasting empire. In this context, three dynasties are particularly noteworthy: those of Ur and Uruk, the Lagash dynasty with the remarkable reforms of Uruk-agina, and then the rise of Kish and other cities further north. At the beginning of the third millennium, two city-states had already gained a solid reputation: Uruk, which prides itself on its religious and mythical history, and Ur, famous for its devotion to the moon god, Nana. The legendary tales of the time speak of great rulers, sometimes on the border between history and mythology. Among them is the most famous of all, Gilgamesh, presented in the Mesopotamian tradition as king of Uruk. Although it is difficult to distinguish the historical part from the legendary part, cuneiform texts describe Gilgamesh as a builder king, responsible for the construction of massive walls around Uruk. These fortifications, some of which were uncovered by later archaeological excavations, attest to the desire to protect the city against potential attackers. The figure of Gilgamesh is also associated with fantastical feats, the quest for immortality, and his friendship with a wild being named Enkidu. These elements, highlighted in the Epic of Gilgamesh in a later form, are rooted in already ancient oral traditions around 2500 BC. Even if Gilgamesh belongs more to myth than factual history, his character illustrates a real phenomenon. Sumerian kings wished to assert their prestige through large architectural projects and the affirmation of a strong personal power. Uruk, thanks to its size and religious antiquity, thus seeks to play a dominant role in the region. For its part, Ur, often called Ur of the Chaldeans in biblical texts, although this denomination is anachronistic for the Sumerian period, also experiences a succession of ambitious kings. The rulers of Ur try to extend their authority by subjugating neighboring cities or by concluding alliances through royal marriages and trade treaties. The cult of Nana, the moon god, acts as a religious cement for the population. The temple dedicated to Nana, also in the form of a ziggurat, becomes an important economic center, collecting tributes in grain, livestock, and precious metals. Successive dynasties of Ur maintain the Sumerian tradition of the Ensi, a term that can be translated as governor or prince. The Ensi represents both the highest political authority of the city and the intermediary with the tutelary divinity. As such, he ensures the organization of sacred rites aimed at maintaining agricultural prosperity and social cohesion. Moreover, Ur, thanks to its geographical position near the Persian Gulf, or at least a more extensive coastline than today, benefits from access to maritime routes that promote distant trade, notably with the Indus Valley and present-day Oman. Within the Sumerian mosaic, Lagash stands out from the mid-3rd millennium thanks to energetic kings. It is known that this city maintains regular conflicts with its neighbor Umma for the control of fertile lands and irrigation canals. In this climate of tensions, social inequalities increase. Archives mention growing corruption among some temple administrators, and the peasant population complains about the increased tax burden. The fiscal pressure weighs especially on the most disadvantaged, who must both contribute to war financing and accept imposed corvées for canal maintenance. Around 2350 BC, a man named Urukagina comes to power in the city-state of Lagash. From the beginning of his reign, he distinguishes himself from his predecessors by addressing a plague that is eating away at Sumerian society: corruption. In a world dominated by religious elites and administrators, he dares to introduce unprecedented reforms. The priests, until then all-powerful, can no longer demand exorbitant offerings under the pretext of sacred ceremonies. Religious power is limited, redefining the balance between the temple and the people. The judges, often accused of rendering arbitrary verdicts in exchange for bribes, are placed under surveillance. From now on, the courts must function according to more equitable principles of justice, thus protecting the most vulnerable citizens. But the most striking reform concerns debts. Aware of the crushing weight of loans on the popular classes, Urukagina decides to reduce certain debts and free those who had been enslaved for failing to repay them. A revolutionary measure for the time, foreshadowing what history would later call debt forgiveness. These reforms, mentioned in cuneiform inscriptions discovered in Lagash, are considered one of the earliest attempts at social legislation in history. They precede the famous law codes that would later emerge in Mesopotamia, such as the Code of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC and the Code of Hammurabi around 1750 BC. In his texts, Urukagina emphasizes the notion of justice and divine mercy, presenting himself as the protector of widows and orphans. He also describes himself as the restorer of the social balance desired by the gods. To the north of Lower Mesopotamia, the city of Kish attracts attention due to its strategic position. It is located near the boundary between central Mesopotamia and Lower Mesopotamia, thus controlling important caravan routes. The kings of Kish sometimes boast of the title King of Kish as an honorary status, suggesting a form of primacy over other Sumerian cities. While this supremacy remains primarily symbolic, Kish nevertheless profits from its location to forge alliances and host numerous foreign merchants. During this period, Mesopotamia faces pressures from the north and the east. Peoples referred to in Sumerian texts as Subarians or Hurrians begin to make their mark in the mountainous areas. The Hurrians, in particular, gradually settle in Upper Mesopotamia, developing their own cultures and establishing new kingdoms. From time to time, they conduct raids into the richer plains to acquire livestock, grain, or slaves. These incursions compel the Sumerian kings to fortify their cities and recruit troops of professional soldiers or mercenaries. Simultaneously, small groups of nomadic Semitic people, sometimes associated with the Martu, a Sumerian term that would later give Amorites, begin migrating from the west in search of pastures and arable lands. The political fabric of the region thus becomes more complex. The major Sumerian cities must manage both their internal rivalries and the surveillance of their borders. Despite the efforts of some kings to extend their domination, no city manages to establish a truly unified empire. Alliances are formed and undone according to commercial and military interests. A ruler of Kish might temporarily ally with Ur to counter an aggressor from Elam, while Lagash may conclude a non-aggression pact with Ummah to focus on the Hurrian threat. Historians sometimes mention a balance system in which each city seeks to prevent another from becoming too powerful.